Hey, how's everybody doing? I'm going to share some tales of schizophrenic. That's myself. Got some stories and read. And, you can follow along. Be kind of boring to look at, but just reading from what I've wrote already. So anyway, here we go. Most of the memories, or whatever you want to call them, that I talk about here, seem to come to me in my early 30s. I had been single for several years and just going about my everyday activities. It's not like they came to me in a dream or some drug high. It just seems like I may have either lived through some tragic things, maybe a past life's came to me, memories came to me, or these are just some interesting tales of a diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic. The most vivid I have, and definitely the most tragic memory I have, is when my memory got rebooted, or somewhat rebooted anyway. I can remember being awoken from a system of man-made caves by who I know now as Bone. This could be the first time I ever saw him. I wouldn't say I met him because I was above ground in no time. Seems like I remember him saying that he had interpreted what I had written before the Ice Age, and that other people in the cave network were dead. He said he knew it was too soon for me, but I had to be awakened. I then ran away from the town out into the country and saw a house cat that I remember being a cat of my father's that passed away recently around 2013. Uh, Obviously, at this time, I didn't know the cat. I tried to grab her tail, but don't remember if I was successful or not because as fast as I ran away from town, I was back. This was just a flash of time, maybe a few seconds of going out into the country and then coming back. Don't remember the run actually, but it must have been about a mile each way as I look at it now because still live in the town. As I got back into town, I saw Sylvester Stallone skinning rattlesnakes. I mean, this guy was an animal. He had a high he had a pile about 10 feet high. I don't remember him being there when I came out of the cave network. He was right above the cave network, about 10 yards from where I came out. I must say it gets weirder as the story goes on. After passing into the area I now know as El Capitan Road, where it ends into a market intersection, this is where the system of cave was, and to this day there's a pile of dirt there. Market was there along with its variety store. That's all I remember being around there. It seems like I even remember the highway being there because Sylvester's pile of snakes was about half the height of the overpass. Sylvester said that it's too late. Blood has been drawn. As I ran by him, slowed at the end of the road, it was as if some being, it was as it was as if I was some being that was a regulator that was attracted to blood, and he knew. There was a small crowd of people, and a Latino man had shears. I was naked, and the man sheared my testicles off. I can remember hearing that my family had been found from a crowd of people, and that I would be all right because of medication as I ran away. South, down the street. Next thing I remember was sitting on the side of the street talking to my grandfather, who called me over, and him saying I had 20 wives and that I had eaten one of them. I was in tears and said just that I want one. Next Next, my grandfather and I, were walking towards what is now the north side of the fire station, and I saw a crowd of Latino men in a circle. There were people everywhere, and as I remember, there were houses to the north along the side of the street, and I saw Keke, who is a cat that just passed away not too long ago of mine, lived to be 17 years old, but at the time she was just the same size as she always was and laying like cats do with their front paws under their chest, in front of the yard and the house with people all around. My grandfather was walking me towards a circle of men. It jumped out of my skin. Well, I was put into the circle to fight. It jumped out of my skin, my muscular skeletal structure, jumped out of my skin, and I looked at my backside. I was about 10 feet above it, and I jumped back into my skin. I saw my testicles hanging again when I jumped out. My grandfather said he was wondering how he was going to get my balls on without feeling gay, and he thanked God. He was so fast at sewing them back on that I didn't see him do it in the flash of time it took to jump out of my skin and leave the skin standing and jump back into it. He said I had an extra set on my back. He had mentioned he was so fast at sewing because of being a soldier in a war or something of the sort. Once we got there, I was thrown in the circle against another boy because it seemed like I was about the age of a fifth grader. I was pulled out of the circle real fast by my grandfather, so fast that the other boy didn't know what happened and seemed to have gotten credit for eating me. I looked back as the crowd erupted with cheer, and I somehow saw over the crowd as my vision used to bend, and the small cat I had seen earlier, KK, just laying there in the front yard, was was in the air now in attack mode on some little Latino boy that was approaching the crowd. I knew her attack meant that her intentions were to eat the boy, so all I could do was eat her in midair. I jumped back to my grandfather fast enough that he didn't even know what I had done. I was in tears because all the tragic events, and my grandfather says we were walking that this is the first day of creation. Maybe that's what he had learned to speak of my language that Bone had interpreted in the caves previously. Because I do remember him saying I had interpreted. It took a long time, but he had interpreted what my writings were. We heard dogfights happening to the right or north of us, and I told my grandfather we shouldn't go that way. So we turned to the left before Schindel School and walked about 50 yards past the fence. As we were walking, it seemed as though I heard my grandfather say we were going to the market. I remember stretching out my skin, growling and barking like a dog. He said, "Oh, this is too good." As we walked further, there were small circles of people that had fights going on inside them. There were circles everywhere, probably about 20 that I could see. We were walking by a circle with one boy my size in it, and I overheard him saying to the circle of people around him that Rambo is gay. I had eyed the boys' calf muzzles and thought were nice looking for some reason. Guess I went into market mode for my body. I jumped over people to get into the circle and the fight was on. Just as fast as I had jumped into the circle, the fight was over, and I had eaten the boy, metabolized him, defecated him out, and ate the feces before it touched the ground again, as I did a flip through the air. I was out of the circle of people before they even knew what happened to the boy inside. My grandfather had seen the whole thing. He said, "Finally, that must be how you get rid of a person," as if people couldn't die before. It was as if I had learned this fighting before, which I must have been a fighter to have 20 wives in some ice age. I saw Sylvester Stallone again, and he said, "There you are, my brother." We then started conversing. He was thankful that I spoke English, and I asked him if he had ever eaten anyone. He replied that he had eaten about 500 men. I asked him if he still sees Adrian from his movie Rocky. He said that he hadn't seen her since the first fight he was in. This is where it seems weird because how do I get thawed out from an ice age but still know about the movies Rocky and Rambo? Sylvester said that he was my brother because we both have the vein on our front shoulder and both have upper and lower canine teeth. I was walking away with my grandfather and he said, "Uh-oh," because I had some feces starting to run down my anus. Mind you, I was butt naked. He said, "Here you go," as he defecated toilet paper like he had just went and ate a tree and come back. I then saw my brothers running, saying that one of them had eaten a crowd of people. Somehow I heard people yelling at him and stuff. Somehow I got to where there were still crowds of people fighting in circles between the old supermarket and church in front of an old drugstore. Sylvester gave me a piece of wire, told me to tap someone with it. I saw Bone again and poked him with the wire on his tailbone. He turned around and said, "Thank God." I was about to eat my next opponent. I didn't care. I just wanted a circle of people around us because I knew it was going to be a good fight. I pushed him on the collarbone hard enough to break it and then knew myself the fight wasn't fair anymore. I was pulled by Sylvester out of the fight and we went behind the supermarket and I was placed on one of Wolverine's blades out of his hands, along with other little boys on each blade, through their anuses, and they were dead with blood flowing down Wolverine's blade. I remember Bones saying to just relax as I was pulled away, and I survived having Wolverine's blade up my anus as Sylvester Sloan grabbed me off the blade and held me. Wolverine took his blade hand and, with one blade, cut part of Sylvester's earlobe off. It was as if he was mad that I didn't die, and that was their way of killing people, killing little boys back then that wanted to fight. Sylvester said something of the sort, "You genetic mutation, you're supposed to be able to keep your cool," to Wolverine. After that, I remember Bones saying that he had seen his future self, but hadn't seen mine. A second later, he said that he saw my future self. To this day, I feel my future self is watching out for my present self. Then I somehow was near Schindel School, and I remember Bones saying that it was the new human law that everyone now had to eat someone and save that person. Seemed like a crowd of adults were around, like maybe his dad, my dad, and others not sure. Bone put his hands up in my mouth and felt my upper jaw and said that I had involuntary canine teeth and that it was an involuntary manslaughter I had done because it seemed like they found out about the fight. I mentioned to Bone, "What was all the fighting for? Where are the women?" His reply was, "Good question. I think I'm going to stop there. I got more to read." That was up to page 12, and I got about 23, 24 pages, so stay tuned.